The 1950s were a golden age of automotive innovation, but not every bold idea found success. Triumph, Plymouth, and Ford took risks with cars that were ambitious, daring, and ahead of their time. But some flopped in ways no one expected. What went wrong? Was it bad timing, risky designs, or a market that wasn't ready? Stick around, because the last car on this list has a story so surprising, it might just change how you see automotive history forever. Starting off, we have the 1953 Willys Aero. Now, Willys Overland was great at making Jeeps, tough, rugged vehicles that worked well in the military and off-road markets. But when they tried to focus on passenger cars after the war, they stumbled. In the 1950s, Americans wanted big, powerful cars, and the Aero didn't fit that vibe. The big three, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, were already dominating with vehicles that matched these tastes, leaving little room for a compact car like the Aero. Then there was the pricing. The Aero cost around $2,200 in 1952 to 1953. Compare that to the Chevrolet Bel Air, which was about $1,780, a much better deal for most families at the time. With a median household income of just $3,900, many buyers couldn't justify spending so much on a smaller car, especially when larger, more feature-packed options were available for less. But the big three didn't just have better products. They also had the resources to sell them cheaper. Their massive production scales meant lower costs per car and more models to choose from. Willys Overland simply couldn't keep up with that level of competition. The 1953 Willys Aero had a tough ride from the start. Despite offering decent performance and fuel economy for a compact car, it couldn't keep up with what consumers wanted, and quickly fell out of favor. Here's why. But what about the performance and features? Surely it had to shine there, right? Well, not exactly. You see, while the Aero performed well enough for its class, it lacked the wow factor. By the early 1950s, buyers expected stylish designs and advanced features, and the Aero's look felt outdated. Even though it sold about 30,000 units in its first year, interest fizzled fast. Adding more engine options didn't help much either. People were leaning toward bigger, more powerful cars from the competition. The early 1950s were cutthroat in the car market. Ford and Chevrolet were locked in price wars, offering better cars at lower prices. Smaller players like Willys couldn't compete with the big three's resources and economies of scale. The Aero simply couldn't carve out a strong niche in this aggressive environment. The merger between Willys and Kaiser in 1954 added to the Aero's troubles. While the merger was supposed to help both companies, it created confusion. There was no clear plan for the Aero, and shifting management priorities made things worse. By 1955, only about 5,000 units were produced before Willys stopped making passenger cars altogether. The Willys Aero failed because it didn't offer what the market wanted: exciting features, competitive pricing, or a unique identity. It was also released at a time when bigger players dominated the market, and corporate instability after the merger sealed its fate. Ultimately, it's the story of a car that couldn't keep up in a rapidly changing automotive world. Moving on, we have the 1957 Rambler Rebel. The 1957 Rambler Rebel had the makings of an exciting muscle car, but it never got the spotlight it deserved. The Rebel was introduced by American Motors Corporation as a performance-oriented car with a powerful 327 cubic inch V8 engine. It had all the ingredients to attract thrill seekers in the emerging muscle car market. However, AMC's leadership, especially George Romney, was more focused on promoting compact, economical cars, which were gaining popularity in post-war America. This split focus meant the Rebel wasn't given the attention it needed to thrive in the muscle car segment. The Rebel was designed as a limited edition car, with only about 1,500 units produced. That scarcity alone made it hard for the model to make a significant impact. Adding to its struggles, AMC initially promised an innovative electronic fuel injection system, but it never made it to production due to reliability issues. Instead, the car was equipped with a standard 4-barrel carburetor, which felt like a letdown compared to the hype. This missing innovation hurt its appeal in a market dominated by bolder, more feature-rich competitors. By 1958, the Rebel was downgraded to a more basic version, with fewer standout features, further diluting its identity. AMC's half-hearted approach to the muscle car trend combined with production and feature setbacks, left the Rebel overshadowed by competitors from larger automakers. AMC launched the Rebel at a time when it was phasing out legacy brands like Hudson and Nash, trying to rebuild its identity. But this created a muddled message. Consumers didn't quite know where the Rebel fit in AMC's lineup. The name Rebel was bold, but without a clear strategy or consistent branding, it failed to establish a strong connection with buyers. Discontinuing it after just 1 year only reinforced the idea that the Rebel was a short-lived experiment rather than a serious contender. By the late 1950s, the automotive market was heating up. Giants like Ford, Chevrolet, and Chrysler were rolling out muscle cars with better performance, aggressive marketing, and broader appeal. While the Rebel's 327 cubic-inch V8 was impressive, it wasn't enough to stand out in this crowded space. Positive press at launch couldn't translate into lasting success, especially when AMC lacked the resources to compete with the heavyweights. Ultimately, the Rebel's downfall came from a mix of internal and external factors. AMC's focus on economy cars clashed with the muscle car ambitions of the Rebel. Limited production and unfulfilled promises, like the absence of the much-hyped electronic fuel injection, further dampened its appeal. Branding missteps and fierce competition sealed its fate. So it might have been ahead of its time, but without a clear vision or strong backing, it faded into history as an interesting what-could-have-been story. Taking the spotlight next is the 1954 Dodge La Femme. The 1954 Dodge La Femme stands out as a classic example of how not to market a car. Dodge aimed to create a car designed for women, but their approach relied on outdated stereotypes. The La Femme was decked out in pastel pinks and came with accessories like a raincoat, umbrella, and beauty products, all marked as essentials for women. The tagline, "By special appointment to Her Majesty, the American Woman," tried to sound elegant, but ended up feeling patronizing. Instead of highlighting the car's performance or practicality, Dodge focused entirely on these accessories, which alienated women looking for a solid, reliable vehicle, rather than a gendered gimmick. The La Femme's marketing failed to explain why it was a better choice beyond its pink paint and feminine add-ons. Dodge didn't promote its driving experience, durability, or features that appealed to all buyers. As a result, many potential customers saw it as superficial, while others found the idea of a women-only car limiting and unnecessary. On top of the flawed strategy, Dodge rolled out the La Femme slowly and in limited numbers, making it hard for interested buyers to even find one. This created frustration and dampened enthusiasm. In its first year, fewer than 1,000 units were sold. Dodge made the La Femme hard to find by allocating only a few models to dealerships. This exclusivity was meant to generate buzz, but ended up limiting exposure. Many interested buyers never even got to see the car in person, turning what could have been a selling point into a roadblock. The 1950s marked a period of shifting cultural dynamics. During World War II, women took on diverse roles, and though many returned to traditional domestic roles post-war, their expectations had evolved. They wanted vehicles that matched their growing independence, not ones that pleased outdated stereotypes. Dodge missed this shift entirely. Instead of focusing on performance, reliability, or universal appeal, the La Femme doubled down on pink aesthetics and feminine accessories, which felt out of touch. Women were looking for cars that reflected their individuality and needs, not superficial designs that emphasize their gender. By focusing too much on stereotypical ideas of femininity, Dodge failed to understand its audience. Women weren't asking for gender-specific cars. They wanted vehicles that were stylish, reliable, and capable, just like everyone else. The La Femme, with its narrow appeal and lack of practical focus, was simply not what the modern woman wanted. The La Femme sold fewer than 2,500 units before being discontinued in 1956, serving as a cautionary tale for the auto industry. Its failure highlighted the importance of understanding cultural trends and consumer preferences. Instead of embracing stereotypes, automakers learned they needed to create vehicles that spoke to all buyers' needs and aspirations. Next up is the 1951 and 1952 Plymouth Cranbrook. In the early 1950s, Plymouth was trying to make its mark with the Cranbrook, Cambridge, and Concorde models. These cars were part of Plymouth's post-war push to stay relevant, but things didn't quite go as planned. But let's talk about Cranbrook, which hit the streets in 1951. It replaced the Special Deluxe and came with a solid but unremarkable 217 cubic inch flathead 6-cylinder engine. This little powerhouse produced 97 horsepower, which was decent for the time. The design? Well, it was mostly a repeat of the previous year with some tweaks like a refreshed front and stylish speedwave accents on the hood. Plymouth offered a variety of body styles from sedans to coupes, giving buyers a bit of choice. Now here's where things started to go south. The competition. Ford and Chevrolet were shaking up the market with innovations like V8 engines and automatic transmissions. Plymouth, not so much. Their offerings felt stuck in the past. And by 1952, the cars were essentially carbon copies of the 1951 models. Why? The Korean War had caused material shortages, limiting Plymouth's ability to update their designs. Customers noticed. While Ford and Chevy were turning heads with sleek, modern cars, Plymouth's lineup started to feel, well, old-fashioned. Buyers wanted something exciting, and Plymouth's stagnation cost them dearly. But what about the engine? Well, Plymouth's flathead 6-cylinder was a workhorse, no doubt. But compared to the roaring V8 engines from Ford and Chevrolet, it felt underwhelming. Drivers wanted power, and Plymouth just couldn't keep up. The Cranbrook's performance was solid, but lacked the thrill factor buyers were craving. Then there was the design. Chrysler's president at the time, K.T. Keller, had a practical mindset. He believed cars should be functional and roomy rather than flashy. While that worked for a while, the early 50s saw consumers shifting towards larger, more stylish cars loaded with modern features. Plymouth's conservative approach just didn't excite buyers who wanted cars that turned heads. The numbers tell the story. In 1951, Plymouth sold over 550,000 Cranbrooks, a respectable figure. But by 1952, sales plummeted to around 368,000. Why? Stagnant designs and uninspired updates. However, things started looking up in 1953 when Plymouth introduced a redesign that better matched what buyers wanted. And let's not forget the competition. Ford and Chevrolet were taking big swings with innovative designs, powerful engines, and features aimed at younger drivers. Plymouth struggled to stand out in this rapidly evolving market. They missed the mark in capturing the excitement and innovation of their time. It's a story of what could have been in automotive history. Don't you think they deserved another shot with better features? Moving on, we have the Crosley Hotshot, 1950 to 1952. The Crosley Hotshot was a small, affordable roadster made between 1950 and 1952, aiming to bring a sports car to the masses in post-war America. However, despite its lightweight design and some innovative features, the Hotshot didn't quite make the mark. Now, the Hotshot had a unique and compact design. It was powered by a 44 cubic inch 0.7-liter 4-cylinder engine that produced just 26.5 horsepower. This was pretty underwhelming compared to other sports cars on the market, which often had more powerful engines. The car's light weight, just over 1,000 pounds, helped with fuel efficiency, but it didn't make up for the lack of power on the road. The car also came with a 3-speed manual transmission and a simple, clean interior. One notable feature was its disc brakes on all 4 wheels, which were ahead of its time for a car of its class. But in the end, these features couldn't overcome the car's performance struggles. But what were the reasons for its failure? The underpowered engine was the main issue. With just that much horsepower, the Hotshot couldn't keep up with more powerful competitors in the sports car market. For many, sports cars are about the thrill of driving, and the Hotshot didn't deliver that. On top of that, there were quality control issues during production, leading to mechanical failures and poor reliability. Many owners reported problems with the car, which didn't help its reputation. When the Crosley Hotshot was introduced, the automotive landscape in America was rapidly changing. Consumers were beginning to prefer larger cars that offered more comfort and power, especially with the post-war boom. The Hotshot's small size and modest capabilities didn't quite match these shifting preferences, making it hard for Crosley to attract the attention of mainstream buyers who were looking for more substantial vehicles. The competition was fierce, too. The Hotshot entered a market dominated by established brands like Chevrolet and Ford, who offered sports cars that were not only more powerful, but also came with the backing of strong brand recognition and better marketing. These factors made it even harder for the Hotshot to stand out, despite its unique design and lower price point. On top of that, limited production numbers limited the Hotshot's visibility. Crosley wasn't a major player in the industry, and with ongoing financial struggles, the company couldn't afford to heavily market the Hotshot. This lack of exposure meant fewer potential buyers even knew about the car, and those who did were often drawn to more reliable, better-performing alternatives. Next up, we have the 1954 Kaiser Darrin. The 1954 Kaiser Darrin is a striking example of how beauty and innovation aren't always enough to guarantee success. While it dazzled with its design and forward-thinking features, a series of challenges led to its downfall and marked the end of the Kaiser brand. Kaiser Motors, founded by industrialist Henry J. Kaiser, was already fighting an uphill battle by the early 1950s. Dominated by giants like General Motors and Ford, the market left little room for smaller players. Amid this uncertainty, Howard Dutch Darrin proposed an ambitious sports car concept based on the compact Henry J. chassis. Initially met with skepticism, the product gained traction thanks to Darrin's persistence and the influence of Kaiser's wife. The Darrin debuted at the 1953 New York Auto Show and wowed audiences with its fiberglass body, innovative sliding doors, and elegant European-inspired styling. Its promise was undeniable, but production issues and market dynamics soon turned enthusiasm into frustration. The Darrin's fiberglass body was outsourced to Glasspar, causing significant production delays. By the time the car hit showrooms in 1954, it was up against stiff competition from the Chevrolet Corvette, which had already established itself as America's sports car. Buyers were drawn to the Corvette's more powerful engine and Chevrolet's trusted reputation, leaving the Darrin struggling to make its mark. Beyond timing and competition, the Darrin faced another issue: its price. Positioned as a premium car, it alienated many potential buyers seeking value for money. With Kaiser Motors' financial troubles increasing, the Darrin had little room to succeed. Marketed as a sports car, the Darrin packed a modest 3.7-liter inline-six engine delivering just 90 horsepower. While stylish, it lacked the performance expected of a true sports car, feeling more like a cruiser than a competitor in its segment. Critics pointed out this disconnect, especially as other cars in the class offered better speed and handling. Compounding the issue was its steep price, $3,668, placing it well above many rivals. For cost-conscious buyers, the Darrin's limited performance didn't justify the high cost. The Darrin's unique design included sliding doors, which drew attention but had practical flaws. Narrow openings made getting in and out difficult, and the doors frequently jammed on early models. Its folding roof, while innovative, leaked during rain, frustrating owners who expected more from such a premium-priced car. Only 435 units were produced before the Darrin's production ended in August 1954. Its failure was a significant blow to Kaiser Motors, which ceased U.S. production by 1955. While the Kaiser Darrin failed commercially, it remains celebrated for its daring design and spirit of innovation. It's a lesson in the risks of mismatched market strategies and the importance of aligning bold ideas with practical execution. Now let's shift our focus to the 1959 Edsel Ranger. The 1959 Edsel Ranger is often remembered as one of the biggest flops in car history. The Edsel's biggest problem was that it launched during a recession that began in late 1957. With consumer spending dropping, people weren't eager to buy expensive cars. The Edsel was marketed as a premium vehicle, but during tough economic times, that just didn't work. Buyers were more interested in affordable options, and Ford's high expectations quickly crashed when sales dropped by over 70% in the first year. The design of the Edsel didn't help its case either. The car's horse-collar grille, meant to make it stand out, ended up turning a lot of people off. Ford called it futuristic, but many buyers thought it looked strange and unattractive. The styling was so different from what other cars were offering that it left potential customers confused and unwilling to take the plunge. While Ford wanted the Edsel to have a unique identity, the unconventional look ended up causing more harm than good. As a result, the Edsel received tons of negative feedback and couldn't find its place in the market. one of the biggest issues with the Edsel was its poor quality. There were multiple mechanical problems reported, from faulty welds to leaky trunks. But the biggest headache was the Teletouch shifter system. Designed to be mounted on the steering wheel, this system malfunctioned often because of poor wiring placement near the exhaust. The design confused drivers, with many accidentally pressing the shifter buttons instead of the horn. On top of that, because the Edsels were assembled alongside Ford and Mercury models in the same factories, there were inconsistencies in the build quality. The marketing for the Edsel was another big misstep. Despite a huge promotional campaign, the execution fell flat. Dealers received incomplete cars, sometimes with spare parts still in the trunk. This left them unprepared and frustrated, unable to sell the cars effectively. And while Ford tried to build up excitement for the Edsel, the marketing didn't create a strong brand identity. Unlike competitors like Pontiac or Oldsmobile, Edsel didn't have the customer loyalty or recognition it needed to succeed. In the end, the 1959 Edsel Ranger's failure was a mix of bad timing, poor design, quality control problems, and ineffective marketing. These issues created the perfect storm, leading to the end of the Edsel brand after just 3 years. The Edsel is a classic example of how misalignment with consumer expectations and market conditions can derail even the most hyped car. Moving on, we have the 1958 Studebaker Scotsman. The 1958 Studebaker Scotsman holds a special place in American automotive history, but not necessarily for the reasons you'd expect. This model was launched at a time when Studebaker, a company with a deep history dating back to 1852, was facing some serious financial struggles. Competing against the giants of the industry like General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, Studebaker needed something that could appeal to the budget-conscious crowd. Then came the Scotsman, a simple, no-frills car designed to get people from point A to point B without breaking the bank. In the post-war years, the demand for luxurious feature-packed vehicles was soaring, but Studebaker, a smaller player, couldn't keep up. The Scotsman was their answer to that challenge. It was priced to be affordable, aiming to offer a budget-friendly alternative to their more expensive models. The idea was to capture the market of people who didn't need all the bells and whistles, but still wanted something reliable and easy on the wallet. The Scotsman itself was pretty basic, and that's exactly what it was meant to be. It was available mainly as a two-door sedan with a simple design, keeping things as minimal as possible. Powered by a 6-cylinder engine, it offered decent performance for daily driving, though it couldn't compete with the more powerful V8 engines that other manufacturers were offering. Inside, the Scotsman was even more stripped down, with a bare-bones interior that reflected its affordable pricing. No fancy features, just the essentials. But the real hook for the Scotsman was its pricing. It was cheaper than most of its competitors, making it a solid option for anyone looking for a no-nonsense car. But of course, this came at a cost. The lack of options and features while making it affordable meant the Scotsman wasn't as appealing as other models in the market, especially to buyers used to a little more luxury in their vehicles. But why didn't it make it in the market despite its early potential? Well, there were several key reasons for its failure. First off, the timing just wasn't right. By the late 1950s, car buyers were shifting their preferences towards larger, more luxurious vehicles. People wanted comfort, style, and features that made their driving experience feel special, not just a basic no-frills ride. The Scotsman, with its simple design and minimal features, couldn't compete with the demand for more refined cars that offered a little bit of everything. On top of that, the economic climate in America wasn't exactly in the Scotsman's favor. The country was going through a recession, which made consumers more cautious with their spending. Studebaker, being a smaller company, struggled to keep up with the larger, more resource-rich competitors like GM, Ford, and Chrysler. Without the financial muscle to weather the storm, it was tough for Studebaker to make a real impact. There were also production challenges that hurt the Scotsman's reputation. Studebaker's factories weren't built for the large-scale, efficient production that other automakers had mastered. This led to delays and quality control issues, which only added to the negative perception of the car. If buyers couldn't count on the car's reliability or timely delivery, they weren't likely to take the risk. The marketing for the Scotsman also didn't help its cause. While other companies were rolling out impressive campaigns to promote their new models, Studebaker couldn't generate enough excitement around the Scotsman. they struggled to craft a narrative that would appeal to potential buyers. By 1958, Studebaker's brand image was already on shaky ground due to financial struggles and declining sales. For many consumers, investing in a car from a company on the brink was a gamble they weren't willing to take. All these factors combined to doom the Scotsman and ultimately Studebaker's exit from the auto market in 1966. The Scotsman's failure highlighted the challenges that smaller automakers faced in a rapidly changing market dominated by bigger players. Now, let's direct our attention to the 1958 Packard station wagon. This is yet another fascinating yet ultimately tragic chapter in automotive history. It also marks the end of the iconic Packard brand, which had once been a symbol of luxury and innovation. Despite its unique features, the 1958 model didn't make the impact Packard had hoped for, and there are several reasons why it failed in the marketplace. By 1958, the Packard lineup had expanded to include a 4-door sedan, a 2-door hardtop, a 4-door station wagon, and the Packard Hawk. However, the design and production of these cars were heavily influenced by the financial troubles facing the Studebaker Packard Corporation. The company had to make significant cost-cutting decisions, which led to a drop in the overall quality and appeal of the cars that year. The Packard station wagon in particular was notable for its limited production, with only 159 units built, making it one of the rarest Packards ever produced. So what went wrong for the 1958 Packard station wagon? Well, when it came to design, the 1958 Packard tried to keep up with the latest automotive trends. It featured a bold fish-mouth grille and distinctive canted tail fins, both of which were attempts to align with the era's styling. But these design elements didn't quite come together as hoped. Critics felt the look was disjointed and poorly integrated. Instead of a refined aesthetic, the car seemed cobbled together, leading to negative comparisons with the offerings of competitors, who were getting the design right. To make matters worse, Packard reused components from earlier models, such as the taillights, which made the car feel outdated compared to newer, more modern designs from other brands. The car also had the unfortunate task of entering a fiercely competitive automotive market. By this time, many car manufacturers were rolling out innovative designs and modern features that captivated consumers. The Packard, priced at $3,384, found itself in direct competition with trusted brands like Chevrolet and Ford, which offered vehicles with greater reliability and a more established reputation. In this environment, Packard's outdated design and lack of innovation didn't make it the go-to choice for buyers. Consumers were increasingly gravitating toward brands that offered modernity and innovation, qualities that Packard couldn't quite deliver. The financial struggles of Studebaker Packard Corporation also played a significant role in the car's failure. The company was already in serious financial trouble by this point. With limited investment in new technologies or designs, the 1958 Packard models, despite offering some minor improvements over earlier versions, couldn't compete with the progress made by larger manufacturers. The company's inability to keep up with these changes ultimately led to its decision to stop producing Packard vehicles entirely by 1962. The combination of poor design execution, limited production, fierce market competition, and apparent company in financial trouble doomed it from the start. While it's now a rare collector's item due to its limited production, the Packard Clipper Country Sedan serves as a reminder of how quickly fortunes can change in the automotive industry. The final Packard rolled off the assembly line on July 25, 1958, marking the end of a brand that had once been a symbol of luxury and innovation. It's a sad but fascinating chapter in the story of American automotive history. Moving on to our next contender, we have the 1957 Mercury. The 1957 Mercury lineup, particularly the Turnpike Cruiser and Montclair, stands as an ambitious moment in car history. These models were all about luxury and innovation, packing some impressive features for their time. The Turnpike Cruiser, for instance, was a full-size luxury car powered by a 368 cubic inch V8 engine that pushed out 290 horsepower. It was also equipped with standout features like the retractable rear window, named the Breezeway, and push-button transmission controls, making it feel like the future of driving. The Montclair, a slightly more affordable option, had similar performance specs but was marketed as a mid-range luxury car. But despite these cutting-edge features, the 1957 Mercury models didn't last long on the market. They were only around for 2 years before being discontinued. So what went wrong? Well, there were a couple of key reasons why these ambitious cars failed to leave a lasting impression. First, there was the fierce competition in the automotive market. The late 1950s were a golden age for car manufacturing, with companies constantly upping the level. Mercury found itself fighting for attention against domestic powerhouses like Chevrolet and Ford, as well as luxury brands like Cadillac. Meanwhile, competitors were introducing new models with even better performance and more modern designs, leaving Mercury struggling to keep up. Secondly, the economic climate wasn't in Mercury's favor. The late 50s saw some shifts in consumer spending and fuel prices were on the rise. People began leaning towards smaller, more fuel-efficient cars, especially as gas prices climbed. The large size and poor fuel efficiency of the Mercury models made them less appealing in this new market. Along with fierce competition and economic shifts, a few additional factors really held these cars back from achieving lasting success. Quality control issues plagued the production of the 1957 Mercury lineup. Owners reported mechanical problems, particularly with the engines and transmissions, which quickly became a reputation headache for the brand. The reliability of these vehicles came into question, leading to customer dissatisfaction and a sharp drop in sales. Then there were the design choices. While the Mercury's extravagant look with its large tail fins and bold chrome accents was certainly a head-turner, not everyone was a fan. As the 1950s came to a close, consumer tastes began to shift toward more conservative, understated designs. The flashy, futuristic styling of the Mercury, once cutting-edge, began to feel out of place as the decade wore on, making it less appealing to a broader audience. Additionally, production numbers for the Turnpike Cruiser were relatively low, with only about 23,268 units made during its short 2-year production run. This limited availability didn't help Mercury build a strong presence in the market, especially when compared to the higher production volumes of more popular models from competitors like Chevrolet and Ford. So while the 1957 Mercury models were proof of innovative engineering and design, they were ultimately overshadowed by fierce competition and shifting consumer preferences. These factors contributed to their discontinuation after just 2 years, marking a significant moment in the industry as manufacturers began adjusting to a changing automotive landscape. It's a reminder of how even the most innovative ideas can be outpaced by the fast-evolving market and consumer tastes. Next, let's take a look at the 1950 Kaiser Traveler. Kaiser Frazer entered the scene after World War II, aiming to challenge automotive giants like Ford and General Motors. Sounds ambitious, right? But by 1949, the company found itself $39 million in the hole due to overproduction. They made more cars than the market wanted, leaving lots full of unsold vehicles. Meanwhile, their competitors were rolling out new designs that captured the public's attention, making Kaiser Frazer's cars look outdated. Now let's talk about the Kaiser Traveler, one of their most talked about models. On paper, it sounded fantastic. An innovative hatchback design that combined practicality with a bit of flair. But here's the problem. It wasn't built to perfection. The hatchback had serious sealing issues. Imagine buying a car and constantly battling these annoyances. It's no wonder customers and mechanics were fed up. What was supposed to be a selling point turned into a major drawback. At its core, Kaiser Frazer's struggles boiled down to poor planning and execution. They aimed high, but didn't adapt quickly enough to changing consumer preferences or fix critical design flaws. Despite their innovative spirit, these issues eroded trust and sales. Now, the Kaiser Traveler was marketed as a utility vehicle with a spacious cargo area, a forward-thinking idea for its time. It featured a fold-flat rear seat for added practicality, which sounded great. But in reality, poor sealing around the hatchback led to water leaks, wind noise, and dust problems. Customers bought a car that promised versatility but couldn't keep the rain or dirt out. It's no wonder they were unimpressed. By 1951, only about 3,500 units of the Traveler had been produced, signaling its commercial failure. But it wasn't just the design that tripped up Kaiser Frazer. Internal conflicts made things worse. Joseph Frazer, whose experience was key to the company's early success, clashed with Henry Kaiser over production strategies. When Frazer left, the company lost a vital part of its leadership. Without him, the focus shifted entirely to Kaiser-branded vehicles, leaving the Frazer name to fade away. This lack of strategic clarity further hurt their ability to compete in a rapidly evolving market. Despite their innovative spirit, they couldn't keep up with competitors who were delivering not only style, but also reliability. Their failure became a cautionary tale in automotive history, a reminder that great ideas need equally strong execution. Next up is the 1950 Nash Statesman. Built by Nash Motors, the Statesman was more of a statement. It embraced a unique air flight design that was ahead of its time, prioritizing aerodynamics and roominess in an era when these concepts were still catching on. One of the standout features of the Statesman was its unibody construction. This design innovation made the car more rigid, safer, and gave it a lower floor height, which meant passengers got more comfort without the car looking bulky. The exterior had a sleek silhouette with flowing curves, turning heads wherever it went. Inside, Nash brought some clever features, like front seats that could recline to form a sleeping area, a pretty big deal back then, and the weather eye heating system, which kept the cabin cozy. Under the hood, the Statesman wasn't trying to win races. It had a smooth and reliable inline-six engine, capable of reaching a top speed of about 90 miles per hour. The emphasis was on comfort and practicality rather than sheer speed. But despite its innovations, the Statesman struggled in the sales department. Can you guess why that happened? Well, the big three, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, completely dominated the market. These giants had more resources, bigger advertising budgets, and could produce cars at a scale Nash couldn't match. Right after World War II, the economic boom had Americans eager to buy cars, and Nash's larger models, like the Statesman, initially seemed like a good fit. But as the market evolved, people started wanting more compact, fuel-efficient vehicles. Nash, with its focus on bigger cars, missed this shift, and demand for the Statesman shrank. Branding was another hurdle. Nash worked hard to stand out with its distinctive design and unique features like reclining seats, but it didn't quite nail a strong identity. While some admired the Statesman's unconventional style, others thought it looked odd. This love-it-or-hate-it design left the car struggling to win over a broad audience. The Korean War didn't help either. Material shortages during this period slowed down production across the industry, and Nash, being a smaller player compared to the big three, felt the impact even more. This made it harder for the company to keep up with innovation and roll out updated models. On top of all this, Nash eventually decided to shift gears and focus on compact cars like the Rambler. This pivot made larger models like the Statesman less of a priority, leading to reduced production and its eventual discontinuation by 1956. Despite these setbacks, the Nash Statesman holds a special place in automotive history. It's a reminder of how bold ideas can shape future designs, even if they don't always hit the mark in their time. Now this all brings us to the 1950 to 1952 DeSoto, another car that shares a similar fate in automotive history. Chrysler introduced the DeSoto back in 1928, aiming to carve out a unique spot in the market. Fast forward to 1950, and DeSoto was on a high note. They launched models that balanced style and performance beautifully. The real showstopper? The DeSoto Firedome, packing a brand new V8 engine. This powerhouse gave it the muscle to stand toe-to-toe with its competitors. Production that year hit its peak, with over 136,000 units rolling off the line. It seemed like DeSoto was on top of the world. But success was short-lived. By 1951, sales began to slide, dropping to about 106,000 units. Then came 1952, and things went from bad to worse, with production plummeting to just 88,000 cars. Even with the Firedome's V8 engine, an impressive piece of engineering, it wasn't enough to win back buyers. The problem wasn't just the cars, it was also how they were marketed. For instance, in 1952, a DeSoto TV ad played up comfort features instead of hyping the raw power of that V8 engine. This misstep might have made the car seem less exciting, especially when rivals were revving up their innovation and marketing. Market competition was fierce in the mid-priced segment. Ford and General Motors were pumping out cars that grabbed attention, and DeSoto struggled to stand out. Buyers had more choices than ever, and DeSoto didn't do enough to make itself irresistible. Then, there were economic challenges. By the late 1950s, an economic downturn hit hard. Consumers started tightening their belts, and mid-priced cars like DeSoto took the biggest hit. Sales dropped a jaw-dropping 60% by 1958, and that's a tough number to recover from. Adding to the pain were quality control problems. Chrysler vehicles, including DeSoto, developed a bad rep for issues like leaks and rust. These weren't minor annoyances, they tarnished the brand's image. Imagine spending hard-earned money on a car only to see it rust before your eyes. That's not exactly loyalty building. Dealership troubles also played a big role. Chrysler reshuffled its dealer network after World War II, but many dealers decided to focus on more profitable brands, like Plymouth and Chrysler. DeSoto ended up with fewer dealerships, which meant fewer cars in showrooms and less visibility overall. Lastly, DeSoto just didn't keep up with the times. As rivals introduced compact cars to match changing buyer preferences, DeSoto didn't. By 1960, it was painfully clear the brand had missed the boat on innovation. In the end, DeSoto's early promise couldn't save it from a combination of tough competition, economic struggles, and strategic missteps. By the early 1960s, the once proud brand was no more. What could they have done differently, do you think? Now, last but not least, we have the 1953 to 1954 Hudson Jet. The Hudson Jet is an interesting chapter in automotive history. A car that had big ambitions but missed its mark. Produced between 1953 and 1954, it was Hudson Motor Car Company's attempt to jump into the compact car scene, a market that seemed promising as consumers began to lean towards smaller, more economical rides. On paper, the Jet had a lot going for it. Under the hood, it packed a 3.3-liter inline-six engine delivering 104 horsepower. It was light for its time, weighing around 2,730 pounds, and featured modern touches like independent front suspension and a semi-floating rear axle. Hudson even offered the Jet in several styles, including a four-door sedan and a club sedan, all priced around $1,930 to $1,950. The goal? To give budget-conscious buyers a car that was both affordable and reliable. But here's the twist. Despite these solid specs, the Hudson Jet just didn't catch on. Timing was a big part of the problem. By the early 1950s, consumer preferences were shifting. Instead of going smaller, buyers started leaning towards larger, more powerful cars. The Jet's compact size felt out of sync with the mood of the market. It was like trying to sell a cozy little bungalow when everyone wanted sprawling mansions. To make matters worse, the Jet faced stiff competition from industry heavyweights like Chevrolet and Ford. These brands had deep pockets, strong dealer networks, and more appealing designs, making it tough for the Jet to stand out. Next, let's talk about brand perception. By the early 1950s, Hudson was no longer the brand it once was. Although it had a reputation for innovation, it was beginning to feel outdated next to its slicker, more modern competitors. To make matters worse, Hudson was already dealing with financial struggles, and consumers began to lose confidence in the company's ability to deliver. Then there was the issue of limited production. Hudson managed to produce over 35,000 units of the Jet, but in the automotive world, that's not much. Those numbers didn't reflect a thriving demand, but rather lukewarm interest. Combine that with Hudson's overall production decline, and it became clear that the Jet was struggling to make its mark in a crowded marketplace dominated by larger automakers like Ford and Chevrolet. Finally, the merger with Nash Kelvinator Corporation in 1954 to form American Motors Corporation was the nail in the coffin. This corporate shakeup shifted priorities away from the Jet. Amid the transition, promoting or improving the model took a back seat, leaving it overshadowed and largely forgotten. In the end, the Hudson Jet had the bones of a great car. It was compact, innovative, and reasonably priced. But poor timing, an outdated brand image, limited production, and the chaos of a major merger all worked against it. It's a classic case of how even a decent product can't thrive without strong brand support and market alignment. If you could own one of these misunderstood cars, which one would it be, and why? And are there any other 1950s cars you think should be on this list? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into the automotive missteps of the 50s, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And if you're craving more horsepower, click right here to watch our video on the most insane, powerful modern muscle cars in the world. You won't want to miss it.